Thank you, everybody, for being here. Can you all hear me? Is this okay? Good.
Yes.
Thank you. I was last year's 2020 DC-AAPOR president, and that gives me the humbling privilege to be the one to present this award to Jennifer's family. When the time came last year for the 2020 DC-AAPOR Council to select a recipient for this award, which we do every year, we unanimously felt that Jennifer should be the recipient of this award. But in the spirit of respecting the process, the council, felt that we still needed to put out a public call for nominees, which we did, to the full DC-AAPOR membership. And literally only one person was nominated over and over and over again. Everyone I spoke to, people reached out to me, both friends and colleagues, and it was abundantly clear what an impact Jennifer had on her friends, colleagues, and the entire survey research community, which made it a very, very easy decision for council. So I had asked a few people, to write some stuff about Jennifer, and the most profound, I think, came from Jenny Hunter Childs, and she wrote this really perfect and poignant summary. She said, Jennifer exemplified what it meant to be in public service. She was an asset to the field of survey methodology and federal statistics. In her 17 years of service, she accomplished more than most do in their entire career. She was a mentor to the younger generation of staff and was highly regarded by the older generation. In losing her, the Federal Statistical System and the DC-AAPOR community has lost a piece of ourselves. So in honor, DC-AAPOR will be sending the 2020 Outstanding Achievement Award to Jennifer's family. I don't have it here to show today because it's in the mail, but the award will say for outstanding contributions to the field of survey research, exemplary service to the federal statistical community, and leadership within the local research community. And of course, our sincerest condolences to Jennifer's husband, Justin, and sons, Nathan and Noah. She will obviously be missed very, very deeply. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Cameron. Okay, at this point, I'll move over to the video tributes from Commissioner Bill Beach and from Deputy Commissioner Bill Wyatrowski.
It is with great sadness that we are gathered virtually today to remember the life and the work of our colleague, Jennifer Edgar. This was truly a tragic loss for the statistical community as a whole. However, she left a rich legacy of ideas, initiatives, and practices, and I truly hope that we remember those with the fondness that they deserve. Jennifer had recently been selected as the Associate Commissioner for the Office of Survey Methods and Research, OSMR, at the Bureau. OSMR is an office central to everything we do at the Bureau and is critical in many of our innovative initiatives. I can speak for all of us at the Bureau in conveying our excitement about the new energy and ideas Jennifer had already brought to her new office. She spent many years at the forefront of innovation at the Bureau, and she was eager to incorporate data science into the purview of OSMR. She had a broad vision that supported the entire Bureau, and today's event offers us an opportunity to remember, celebrate, and continue Jennifer's great work. We truly miss you, Jennifer.
This is Bill Wyatrowski, Deputy Commissioner at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I knew Jennifer Edgar as a colleague and a friend at BLS for many years. I fondly remember stopping by her office to ask complex questions and getting the simplest, most understandable explanations. She was very, very patient with me and my repeated questions. As a new Associate Commissioner, Jennifer had big plans to enhance and expand behavioral science, math stat, and data science at BLS. I really miss Jennifer, and I, for one, am working to maintain her legacy at the Bureau.
Okay, so with that, I'll now go ahead and present on the Gemini project. I think everyone can see my slides now. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as something of an intro to Laura's presentation, today I'll share a brief overview of the CE surveys for those who may be unfamiliar. And then I'll talk about the Gemini Project, Jennifer's role in the project, and 9 lessons that I learned from her that I think say something about her as an individual and about what she meant to everyone here at BLS. As far as CE goes, it's your fairly typical large-scale household survey with a few wrinkles. The interview survey is about an hour long, designed as a personal visit interview, and collects expenditures on collects data on large and recurring expenditures. The diary survey, on the other hand, collects data on small, frequently purchased items, and together, data from the 2 surveys cover the complete range of consumer expenditures. Data are collected for BLS by the Census Bureau. The sample frame is a national probability sample of households, and response rates for the 2019 surveys were about 55%. Of course, response rates have taken a little bit of a hit in 2020 and 2021 due to pandemic-related restrictions that have impacted in-person data collection, but we're optimistic that they're back on the upswing. So why redesign? Aside from general concerns about measurement error related to a lengthy recall period, survey length, respondent burden, and cognitive complexity, the world has been changing, of course, and particularly so for the buying of goods and services. And so for many survey topics, the phenomenon under investigation may have changed incrementally over the years, but for expenditures, the experience of consumer spending is just so radically different today than it was 30 years ago when the survey was first designed for in its continuing format. So let's just take, for example, milk. You could think of 3 distinct expenditure periods over the last 3 years. So let's start with the highs era in the 1990s, where the purchase of milk was very salient. You go into a store, this store actually has the word dairy in its sign. Maybe you write a check for that milk, so you actually write MILK in the memo field, and you solidly encode the experience in your memory. Then you have the Costco era. So this is the 2000s. You're still going into a physical store, but now the experience of buying milk may be much less memorable since you're probably also buying batteries, a laptop computer, lawn furniture, maybe some flannel shirts. Finally, we have the Peapod era in the 2010s. Now you're not going anywhere. You're just checking boxes on a small screen, and you're probably doing something else at the same time. So for example, right now on this Teams call, someone might be ordering their groceries while I'm talking. That's okay, no need to feel bad, but we understand that the experience of spending money on your groceries is just now going to be even less memorable than ever. And so the challenge is, how do we improve our data collection protocols to address these issues? And also on the flip side, as there's more and more of an electronic trail for your expenditure information than ever before, how do we take advantage of that in collecting better data? So the Gemini Project started because of these concerns about measurement error and research that indicated that there was underreporting of expenditures. And the main goal of the redesign is to reduce measurement error, but with a secondary objective to reduce respondent burden. So in 2013, Committee on National Statistics, CNStat expert panel, convened on redesigning the CE, validated BLS's concerns about issues affecting survey data quality, and provided us with a menu of design options, which focused on 3 main areas: measurement error, environmental changes related to new technology and consumption behaviors, and so this is both on the data collection side and on the consumer experience side, and the need for greater flexibility. Because of the pace and the rate of change in the consumer environment, we need to be more nimble in how we update survey protocols to address those changes. So as I mentioned, the current CE consists of 2 separate surveys, the interview survey and the diary survey. We combine data from these 2 surveys to produce our integrated expenditure estimates. And in the new design, an online diary is being added to facilitate contemporaneous reporting So we're trying to address recall length and other issues, and to provide a platform for future enhancements such as receipt scanning, geolocation technologies, and other features that can take advantage of the electronic trail for consumer expenditures. And so to address concerns about survey length, burden, and complexity, we've also developed plans for a streamlined questionnaire, one that is laid out in a fashion that conforms more towards how we want to collect expenditure data today. There's also a few other redesign elements that we've talked about and researched, but have been delayed pending further testing. So Laura's going to be talking in detail about the online diary. I'll just share a few highlights about the streamlined questionnaire. The streamlined questionnaire focuses on reducing the level of detail and aggregating to the extent possible. It has a records focus, so we want to facilitate the use of records by respondents, including a records path for certain groups of questions. And so those are groups of questions that make the assumption that the respondent has records or receipts on hand. And we're also making some changes to the section order and within section organization in order to better improve the flow of questions. The streamlined questionnaire isn't being field tested, but it is undergoing cognitive testing and expert review before being put into production in a phased implementation starting in 2023. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few other future enhancements that are being considered, such as receipt scanning, self-administered interviewing. So here we know that we need to move to a position where we're allowing respondents to complete the survey themselves without an interviewer, visit, or phone call. In other words, pandemic proofing the survey. And we've also talked about a single sample design, which was put forward earlier. It was put on hold for budgetary reasons, but it's the idea is that the interview survey and the diary survey would be completed by a single sample of respondents rather than the two independent samples that we have now for the interview survey and for the diary survey. So what was Jennifer's role in all of this? Well, at the time this BLS CE research branch photo was taken back in 2009, Jennifer at that point was already heavily involved in conversations about improving the CE as one of the OSMR research psychologists who consulted on CE research projects and for other cognitive testing needs. And it was also roughly in 2009, around the time of this photo, that we started talking about the need for a comprehensive redesign, as opposed to the incremental improvements that we had been making over the years. And although Jennifer started her work with CE as a research psychologist, she continued her involvement as she was promoted to lead OSMR's Behavioral Sciences Research Center, and through her time after being selected to serve as Associate Commissioner and lead the Office of Survey Methods Research overall. And so I thought the best way to illustrate the breadth and the depth of her role was to share the results of many of the redesign tasks that she worked on. So this includes one of the very first discussions about redesigning the survey in 2010, a 2011 article in the SRMS newsletter promoting the redesign initiative, in-depth conversations about options with CINSTAT panel members, and a 2013 evaluation of CINSTAT's recommendations for the redesign. In 2014, Jennifer was a senior participant in a team which reviewed CE's required expenditure categories and made recommendations not only for how the information should be collected, but also for how to group the questions. So I think what's really important to note here is just how immersed Jennifer was in every aspect of the research process in CE. She led cognitive interviews, she conducted analysis, she took meeting notes, she advocated for the survey with stakeholders at all levels. And I have to say that when she was promoted to be one of the youngest associate commissioners in the history of BLS, things like attending program office steering team meetings and taking meeting notes might be considered out of scope for her new role. She might have more important things to spend her time on. But we in CE, we implored her to stay, and that's remarkable in and of itself. Why wouldn't we have just congratulated her, wished her all the best in her new role as OSMR Associate Commissioner, and said our goodbyes? Well, I can think of 9 reasons why. And so these are the 9 lessons that I learned from Jennifer that I think really speak to what made her such an invaluable member of every project, of every team, and of every initiative that she participated in. So the first is to be present. So back when we did have meetings in person, one of Jennifer's really distinctive traits is that you never saw her with her phone out, and often not even a laptop. And that's not because she wasn't prepared for a meeting. Actually, she had everything she needed in her head. But instead, she typically only brought a white piece of computer paper and a number 2 pencil, and she gave everyone in the meeting her full attention. And so when you met with Jennifer, you got the feeling that she was 100% focused on the topic at hand. She was there to discuss it, and she was there to help you make progress on moving the project forward. And that was her only goal. Number 2, be reasonable. So yes, we all hear that big transformative ideas are something that we should strive for, but sensible ideas and sensible solutions have their place too. And this is something that Jennifer really excelled at. When other people were shooting for the moon, and there's a lot of people at BLS that shoot for the moon, it was usually Jennifer who would suggest a straightforward, innovative solution to whatever problem was under discussion. And the beauty of that was that what she would normally suggest is something that was doable, not something that was dependent on a budget initiative or something that was dependent on more resources or more complexity, but she would suggest a solution, an elegant solution to the problem at hand that we were able to implement. Number 3, be a peacemaker. So I don't know what it's like in your organization, but at BLS, we seem to have a lot of really animated meeting discussions with very animated meeting participants, and I'm using the word animated as a euphemism. And when 2 energized, vocal meeting participants were talking past each other, it was always Jennifer who was the one to bring everyone back onto the same page. And maybe this came from her focus group skills, but she was able to get people to state their point and find common ground and allow us to move forward in a productive way. That was such an essential component of really every meeting that I was in with her. Number 4, find a lane. So from a professional development standpoint, I really admired how well Jennifer played to her strengths. She did not try to be an expert in everything. She built a foundation in a particular area and then used common sense to make decisions outside of that area. Number 5, make it make sense. So speaking of common sense, Jennifer was not a statistician. She was not an economist. She was not an IT programmer, but she still expected that reports and deliverables from those groups made sense to non-technical people. So I don't think this was an unreasonable request of hers. And actually, there were quite a few times that products were improved when originators were asked to explain something about it if they couldn't, and then they needed to go back and look under the hood again, resulting in improvements. Number 6, vet everyone. So this is something else I really admired about Jennifer. They say don't let, look past somebody's bad reputation and give them a chance. Jennifer looked past people's good reputations. She didn't let somebody's stellar reputation get in the way of her making her own objective evaluation of what they brought to the table. And there's a specific example that I'm thinking of very early on in the redesign process where we put together an expert panel. This was prior to this Instead expert panel, but just a number of folks who are very highly regarded in the survey field to give us some initial feedback. And there were quite a few people that came very highly recommended, but you never know where that reputation is coming from. And so I think Jennifer did a really good job in the beginning of sort of setting an expectation that people needed to prove themselves through what they contributed, and that they couldn't rest necessarily on just what reputation preceded them. Number 7, connect with everyone. So I don't believe that I ever saw Jennifer attend a meeting, a seminar, or a conference event where I didn't walk out of that meeting and I didn't see her sitting down with somebody after the meeting or standing in the hallway and talking with them, asking honestly how they're doing, how their family's doing, and just catching up. Work is transactional for a lot of people. They want to get into a meeting, they want to get out, they want to do the work, check the box. But that wasn't Jennifer. She made a point to foster real relationships, a network of genuine connections with the people that she worked with. And I think, ultimately that obviously elevates the discourse and helps people communicate and work together in a much more productive and proactive fashion. Number 8, care about the work and the people. So it goes without saying that Jennifer cared about the work, but she also cared about the people doing the work. And so, you see a problem sometimes where project leaders, managers, coworkers, they kind of make an attempt to work with people, but it gets to a point where they just say, you know what, this person, their head isn't in it. They're not really engaged. They're not contributing. I'm just going to write them off. They're not pulling their weight. But that wasn't Jennifer's way. She talked to people. She talked to them about their interests, their motivation, their strengths, their weaknesses, even more importantly, their weaknesses. And she found a way to help the people that she worked with find a way to make a meaningful contribution. And lastly, tell people the hard truth, but in a friendly way. So one of my first interactions with Jennifer was when she was a consultant for the CE research branch way back in 2008 or 2009. And I just completed an analysis using a particular set of variables, and I was presenting my findings at a branch meeting. Jennifer asked a lot of really good questions that unfortunately led to the unavoidable conclusion that the variables that I used, and these are her words, the variables that I used for this particular research topic were useless. Now this represented, months of my time that I'd spent on this analysis, and to hear somebody say, well, this is just useless, it's tough. But she said it, with a smile on her face, as a friend, and it was the truth, and it was something that I learned from, and I went on to improve not only how I worked with those data, but how I worked with data in the general sense, really as a sort of reaction to that sort of experience. And the important thing is that, I walked away from that experience feeling like I had truly received constructive criticism and not criticism just to criticize. So taking all these traits together, you can see a portrait of an individual who somehow managed to contribute great ideas. They managed to make the people around her feel better about themselves and their work, and managed to enable the people around her to do their work better. So I'm not a cook, and I thought there would be a French word for this, and I asked a few people who are cooks yesterday if there was a French word for this, and nobody could think of the word. But if you can imagine an ingredient that holds an entire recipe together through all the steps, that was the role that Jennifer played in the Gemini Project. Thanks. So with that, I will turn things over to Laura.
She's muted.
I also wasn't talking yet. Sorry about that, but thank you. Okay, does everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So before I get started, I'm not going to say a lot about Jennifer because I'm pretty sure I can't get through a presentation if I'm thinking of. She meant a lot to me, and she was such a good mentor. So. And I've learned a lot from her, just like Adam kind of elaborated. So I'm happy to do this seminar on her behalf. A lot of the steps, as Adam showed along the way, she was involved in a great many of them, leading to this online diary. So without further ado, so I'll start with a little bit of a brief background of online diaries. Adam gave some already. I'll just add a little more details. Talk about some of the online diary objectives and some of our past tests. And then I'll be discussing some preliminary results from our most recent test of the online diary, and then what we're planning on next. So So Adam kind of went over the highlights of the diary survey already. So the key points here is historically it's been 2 paper diaries that are provided to respondents to fill out in an open-ended format and enter all of their spending. We collect spending in 4 different categories. We have food and drinks for home consumption, meals, snacks, and drinks away from home, clothing, shoes, jewelry, and accessories, and all other products and services. And each of those, it's grouped into those sections because each of them kind of have slightly different follow-up questions. I say historically, we've been 2 paper diaries. A little bit of a spoiler alert that our current test online diary is in the field in production, kind of as a it's backup because of the pandemic, but it hasn't officially been rolled out yet. So these are the objectives we have for online diaries in general, and why we wanted them in the redesign. First, to present options for contemporaneous data entry. So as they're going and on the go making spending, if they buy a coffee, they can have a mobile device and just enter the coffee on the go so they don't forget it later on. And then if they have some larger items, they could still sit home at a desktop and enter those from a receipt. We wanted to simplify the reporting process as much as possible, make it easier for respondents to enter their daily information. Online reporting also allows our interviewers to monitor results in real time and intervene as necessary if a household needs further encouragement or assistance in reporting expenditures. Then we're hoping to improve unit and item non-response rates through increased options. And also, if we eliminate the paper, then there's a reduction in costs because we don't need to print them. And then also scanning and entering the items is reduced. And finally, and the biggest one, is really providing a platform for future enhancements. And I know Adam alluded to this too. We really wanted to get something out there in the field that then we could grow from to do things like receipt scanning or geolocation, that type of thing. We've had a bunch of past online diary tests, and we've iteratively improved upon each one based on past results. The earliest test was literally just taking a paper form and allowing respondents to fill it out online. So not the most user-friendly experience, and we've definitely grown from there. We added more mobile capabilities and really re-envisioned the diary to take advantage of the online format. And the last one here, the large-scale feasibility test, that's our most recent test that was run in 2019 to 2020, and it'll be the focus of today's talk. So just a quick background on the sample size and procedures. Unlike some of our prior tests, this test was meant to have sufficient sample size to be able to make statistical inferences. So we had a starting sample size of 2,500 using some results from the past tests and on eligibility and response rates. And we were hoping to have about 1,200 completes. Unfortunately, we still ended up with a little less than 1,000, but it's still larger than our past tests have been. The fielding period was from October through April, so October 2019 through April 2020. There was a little bit of impact from the pandemic, obviously. So our data collection for today's presentation, we're talking about through February. It was designed to be very similar to our current paper diary in that the interviewers would have 2 visits, one to place the diary and then one to pick up the diary after the 2-week diary keeping period. We did have the push to online diary first. So if the respondent was eligible and if they refused or were otherwise ineligible, they'd get paper diaries. And then also we included a summary report for the interviewers to basically monitor logins and failed logins, and it had all the entries of the respondents so that they could reach out if they were seeing any problems. Another thing that we do normally in our typical production setting at the end of the diary keeping period, we have what's called recall. And with our paper diaries, this would really be an interviewer sitting down and transcribing into the paper diary any missed expenditures that the respondent maybe forgot over the 2 weeks to write themselves, or oftentimes interviewers will offer to, if the respondent saves their receipts, they'll just help them out by filling out the diary at the end for them. For this test, we had this done differently because we didn't allow the interviewers weren't allowed to log into the respondents account. So we had a tab in the CAPI instrument for the interviewer to record all their additional expenses. And we instructed them to do this for both the paper and the online versions of the diary so that we'd be able to compare how much recall was going into each. And finally, I'm not going to talk much about this, but there was an embedded incentives postcard experiment. And if you are attending AAPOR in May, we'll have a presentation there on the results. Spoiler alert, they showed no impact on response rates for us, unfortunately. So the diary itself was developed in Census's system called Centurion, and it was device optimized based on the screen size. So there was a laptop version, a desktop or tablet version that basically it showed two screens at once. It showed the summary screen on the right and you'd enter data on the left. And then there's a mobile version, which was just a toggle between those two different screens. We did a long time ago decide to do a web-based app. And so you had to be connected to the internet and no data were stored on the device. I mentioned this is looking at data from October 2019 through February 2020. And so jumping right into it, the LSF test had a slightly lower response rate. It was about 47.3% overall for this time period compared to the production response rate at the same time. However, it was fairly close and it's actually pretty high for one of our tests. We've noticed in the past when we've had tests that they've been much lower response rates. So we were pleased to see that we got so close to production and hopefully over time that will improve. For the placement, I mentioned it was a push to online diary first, and there was paper as a backup. So our eligibility requirements first, there was basically three gates. First, we asked that the respondent had online internet access at home, either through a mobile data plan or high-speed internet access. Second, we asked that they would go online at least 1 or 2 times per week. And this was really based on some of the past usability testing. We found that people said that they use the internet, but they weren't really that comfortable. So we wanted to make sure that the people that were using the online diary could actually effectively use it. And finally, we only have an English version of the online diary. So it was for English speakers only. Once taking all the eligibility requirements into consideration, at placement, of those that were actually asked the question were placed with a diary. So we had already at this point lost some people who didn't answer the door. So out of 975, there are about 45.6% that were placed with an online diary, and the remaining with either a Spanish or a paper diary, Spanish paper or a paper diary. And then if you look at pickup, you can see that about 44% remained online and the remaining in paper. So there was a slightly lower completion rate for the online diaries at about just under 83% compared to 89%. Looking at the demographics of the different modes, first we took a look at race and ethnicity. Just to orient you to the graphs, the blue bar is the online diary and the orange bar is the paper diary. And the first three are the race. So there's really not much different between mode choice for race. And then on the right is the Hispanic origin of the reference person. And not too surprising, there was a higher prevalence of paper diaries for Hispanic origin respondents. And that's likely because of the language issue on one of the screeners. For age of reference person, and I should back up and say that the reference person is basically the head of the household, and it's most of the time is the same as the respondent, so it's oriented based on our tables. So for the age of reference person, the online diary household skewed younger, with the majority younger than 49 for online diary participants, and then the majority older than 50 for paper participants. And this and the following demographics weren't really too surprising because we've seen similar findings in the past tests of the online diary, and we've heard similar stories from others doing online surveys. When you look at the education of reference person, online diary households had higher levels of education with an overwhelming majority with at least some college, whereas paper diary households had a higher prevalence of those with just high school or less. And finally, online diary households had more multi-member households than paper diary households. And next, we'll take a quick look at the quality, looking at preliminary expenditure levels, counts, drop-off, and item non-response. And I should say that this is just a preliminary look. We plan to dig deeper once we have data processed. This is all based on our unprocessed data so far. So first, looking at expenditure totals, I'll note that the values for production here, we're just showing the relative levels, and that's because it includes some of our pre-release data for production, which will actually be released tomorrow if you want to check out our Consumer Expenditure Survey webpage at 10 for that. But in terms of comparing to the same sample, it was lower overall for average and median total expenditures for the test compared to the production. And it's something that we've been exploring a little more because you would expect that essentially we were collecting the same thing, so we would expect the values to be similar. And one thing that we think is causing this difference after digging a little deeper is that there seems to be an issue with the recall and how we changed the protocol for collecting recall and pickup. And it wasn't done as expected. We saw some evidence that for the paper diaries, the interviewers were still entering the paper diaries into the paper form, and there wasn't really a lot of data entry into the computer version. And so we also heard in follow-up debriefing sessions that there was some confusion around how to enter them into the CAPI instrument. So we've already taken these findings because I mentioned that we're in production now, and we've kind of already started feeding that back so that we don't run into the same issue in the future. And we're working on developing a better way to capture that extra recall. So on the next screen, we're looking at the actual counts of expenditures. So previously we were looking at the levels of expenditures, the actual amount. And here we're looking at the number of entries entered into the diary. And again, we see that same reduction. It was about 17% fewer entries overall. And most of these are happening in the FDB section, the food and drinks for home consumption section. And this kind of supports what we were previously thinking, because this is a section that would typically have more recall associated with it because people would hold on to their receipts for an interviewer to, they often offer to enter it for them. So if the interviewers weren't entering them, then we'd see a reduction overall. There is a second thing going on here that we found as well, and it's something else that we're looking into trying to improve. We do ask that respondents enter in every single line of a grocery item. So we want them to report milk, eggs, bread, and a lot of times, and more prevalently in the online diary, people were writing just groceries instead of itemizing their receipts. So that's also impacted the overall count of expenditures. And I'll talk in a little bit about some of the things we're going to be testing to try to improve that. So in terms of drop off, this is a measure of respondent fatigue over the diary keeping period. It's defined by the percent of the 2-week entries made in the first week compared to the second week. So if there's no drop off at all and they're reporting evenly, you would expect it to be close to 50%. Higher percentages indicate higher rates of drop off. So this is calculated only for CUs that had at least one entry. And really across the board between the online diary, online paper, and overall and production, there was really no difference. There is a little bit of drop off, but it's not extensive. Next, we look at item non-response, and there's really typically not a lot of item non-response in our diary survey, but we did look at the cost field and the description field. You can see they're all pretty low. There was a significant difference between production and the LSF test for the description field, but it was not very meaningful. For item non-response in terms of business names, we did see an improvement for the online diaries here and for the test overall. And this is really driven because it was a required field for the online diary, whereas it's not required for a paper diary. So we did see a lower rate of item non-response for the business name for this field. So next we take a quick look at respondent burden and different dimensions of burden. At the end of the diary keeping period, after the diary had been completed, we've asked respondents to complete basically a debriefing section. And just a caveat, these are only the most cooperative respondents. So take these values with a grain of salt. So taking a quick look, we modeled these dimensions of burden after the questions that we have in our interview survey. So we have a question about, was this burdensome, or was it difficult, or was it sensitive? And you can see these are by mode, and here the gray is the overall. You can see that at least a little burdensome, it was hovering around 60%. And to give you some context, this for our interview survey in 2019, the same burden questions that were asked were hovering between 67 and 69%. So we're lower than the interview survey, which is 4 waves long, so it's not too surprising. The middle bars show the percent of those reporting at least a little difficulty. And here we do see a difference between paper and online participants, with paper diarists indicating more difficulty. It's important to note that these don't take into account any of the mode selection effects, so that might be influencing the difficulty level for these. And finally, there was not much difference in how sensitive people felt the online diary and the diary was. So going back to our original objectives, so the first one, to present respondents with options for contemporaneous data entry. Our options are now available. I'm giving it a sideways thumb though, because we did look at some of the paradata and there were not too many respondents that were responding contemporaneously. So we did look, and there are some people that were both using the mobile device and on a desktop device, but it wasn't widespread that way. Usually it was one or the other. And we're still kind of digging into the paradata to look at the times of day that people are entering. Simplify the reporting process. Burden and sensitivity were comparable across modes, but difficulty was lower for online participants. Monitor the results in real time. FARs or interviewers had access to a summary report, and we asked at the end of each interview if they used it, and about 72% did use it for follow-up. Improve unit and item response rates through increased options. Response rates did not improve, but the test environment, it's better than prior tests, so I'm giving it kind of a sideways thumb instead. Lower costs compared to the paper option. 50% of respondents did participate online, so that's a reduction in cost. And most importantly, a platform for future enhancements. I am giving 3 enthusiastic thumbs up, because now that it's in the field, we can grow from there. In the field. So our next steps, we're going to continue to analyze the data that we get back once it's processed. It's just recently been processed. So we'll look at our final demographics and the final response rates after taking into consideration those that were just blank. And we'll also look at some of the expenditures with controls, and as well as the editing rates. Then we'll be making a go, no go decision on the full implementation into the production. And finally, I mentioned the continuous improvement. So we already are working on a test to make some improvements to the diary, including an auto suggest feature, and this would just help reduce the respondent burden where they start typing, and some entries will automatically populate for them. We're also looking at testing prompts so that if they start to write groceries, it'll give them a little soft message saying, hey, we'd like you to itemize this for us. And finally, we're also looking at organizing the diary to be trip-based. So going, like, if you go to the store, you write everything down on a single page instead of one at a time. And finally, more use of receipts. It's something that we're continuously exploring. So, and that's all I have. There's my contact information if you have questions. And then I believe we're going to have a Q&A as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Laura. So I don't actually have access to the chat at the moment for some reason. So Jeff, I don't know if you want to scan the chat and see if anybody asked any questions that can be asked of Laura that she can answer, or alternatively, if anyone has any questions, feel free to either use the raise your hand function or just go ahead and ask.
So there are currently no questions in the chat function, but I do want to mention that Dr. Beach mentioned that they have renamed the annual BLS Innovation Award to the Jennifer A. Edgar Innovation Award in memory of Jennifer.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks, Jeff.
So I don't know, Laura, if you can see the chat function, but
I'm trying to pull it up now. Okay. Translate to getting it. Okay, so Lou Berman asks, do you have any thoughts on how this might translate to getting a diary of clinician visits? I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'm trying to, so ours is very much structured around entering expenditures, and it is date based though, so it could in that regard. So I guess it would really depend on what the requirements are for the clinician visits. But I moved a lot of this, I'm sure a lot of the online diaries would be similar in terms of like the mode, like who's selecting into the mode. And I'm less familiar with establishment surveys, so that's not my area of expertise. If anyone else on the call wants to jump in.
But you know, I would mention that I think what's been interesting for us at BLS is some of the trade-offs between the older methods and the newer methods, and so a paper diary obviously has some disadvantages related to its size, and respondents may not want to carry it with them throughout their day in order to report purchases contemporaneously, and having a diary on your smartphone is an advantage over that. On the flip side, we are not at the point as a federal agency where we can make use of the thumbprint access or facial recognition. And so respondents, when using an online diary, need to enter in login credentials. And so that's, you know, that's a barrier to entry that ought to be considered, and one that we've been kind of grappling with as well. So if you could imagine clinicians being very, very busy people, not having a lot of time, if you're trying to roll out a mode of survey collection to them that requires them to do something extra beyond what they would normally do with a paper diary, you know, I would think that might be a factor for consideration.
Adam, can you hear me? This is Lou.
Yes, I can hear you.
First of all, Laura, thanks so much. That was a great presentation, and I really enjoyed seeing your slides and the results. And Adam, thanks for your response as well. And just to clarify, what I'm interested in is for participants who are in our study. So I work on the All of Us research program at NIH. So they've already consented into the study. We already have HIPAA authorization, and they already have an app on their phone that's that we utilize for data collection. What I'd like to find out is where else they're seeking care outside of the traditional venues where they're where we know they're getting care, so that we could potentially augment their fragmented electronic health record data for research purposes. So I wouldn't be interested, at least not for this immediate discussion, to give the smartphone over or to ask clinicians to respond, but it would be our study participants asking them where else they're seeking care outside of the places where they enrolled. That's the piece I'd like to get.
I could definitely see some of our results translating over to that format. And I'm going to put Jeff on the spot because it sounds like some of the food apps work too. Like
wait, let me turn off the camera. There.
Because I know that ERS has been doing some interesting work too in the area of store visits. So, so there's definitely going to be lots of reports coming out related to these questions. I did see another chat question. So one on whether there's going to be an online diary for the American Time Use Survey. So I do know that I've talked with that program and they're learning a lot from our lessons and they're exploring it. So it's something that's on the research agenda, I believe, but it's they're not as far along as we are. I don't want to speak for their program entirely. Since, then what items are more likely to be receipt-based responses? So this is from Eileen O'Brien. So receipt-based responses, what's happened, and this is kind of more anecdotally, we've learned from our interviewers that for long receipts, they really encourage them to just hold on to them and enter them at the end. So usually that's where the food grocery expenditures would more likely be receipt-based. And that's something that we're looking into, and then we know that that's changing as well. So it's just a big question that we have, that especially as people are doing more online grocery shopping, then you're not going to have those paper receipts anymore to hold on to. So it's a big question, and why we wanted to get our online diary out there so we can at least start improving and then answer the big other questions as they come up and things continue to change.
Jeff or Laura, do you see any other questions in the chat? No? Okay. Lastly, if there are no more questions, we wanted to provide at least a little bit of time. If anybody on this call wanted to share any memories of Jennifer or say anything, please feel free to speak up.
This is Carrie Jones. I used to work at BLS. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to try and read what I have to say about Jennifer. There are reasons why I didn't record this before, but here we are. Working with Jennifer was always such a joy. She was steadfast, fun, and caring. She made all of our projects better. And I always knew that she had my back, even after I left BLS. She magically could strike this balance between being resolute and flexible, stoic and kind, always friendly. I remember one time she just completely dismissed my cost concerns and said very firmly, but with a smile, that I have to take my kids to Disney. No questions. But the thing that sticks with me the most is from when my daughter was preparing for major surgery. Mary is, she's the same age as Nathan. And when Jennifer found out about it, she showed up in my office the next day with a bag of toys and a handmade card from Nathan that he had drawn. And I think that just really shows how kind she is and the kind of life that she led, and the kind of mom that she is. And I just want to say I'm very thankful for all of her kindness and support that she's showed me and my family and my team that I left back at BLS. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. That was really beautiful. Anyone else want to share any memories of Jennifer?
I'll take a minute to share a memory of Jennifer. I'm Cynthia Clark at, let's see, am I hooked in? Yeah. And I worked with Jennifer over a year, for over a year of time while I was executive director for the Council of Professional Associations on Federal Statistics. Jennifer was, she was always available. She was, always had a good idea. She always would be responsive to any ideas that anyone put forward. And she was always supportive of moving forward for the FCSM conference. As you know, it was canceled last April, but again, rescheduled for this past September. But she was a real resource and just so committed to providing opportunities for individuals in the Federal Statistical System and colleagues to report on research and innovations in federal statistics. She was really a leader in the federal statistics field and is sorely being missed by many of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Anyone else have anything to share?
Hi, Adam. This is Eileen. You can hear me.
Yes, go ahead, Eileen.
It's just always good to acknowledge. So I met Jennifer earlier in her BLS career. I didn't realize she'd been a consultant, and she had pulled together a session at AAPOR, the National Conference for Association of Public Opinion Researchers. And it's really hard to get a session accepted, much less a paper, when you're early in your career. So she got one of those sessions early on Sunday morning, you know, the one where everyone's looking at their flights and taking the morning off. And so it was this big vacuous hall. She'd invited me to be a speaker on her panel. And the room was so empty and so cold that when I'd finished talking, I went out and sat in the audience. I sat near Lars Leiberg, the former editor of the Journal of Official Statistics. And after Jennifer gave her talk, I turned to Lars and said, "What'd you think?" And he was a man of few words, and he looked at me and said, "That should be published." So afterwards, I convened with Jennifer and told her what a great job it was. And then I shared Lars' remark, and she just she was so excited. She said, yes, you know, she was on her way. And fast forward to about 2 or 3 years ago, when the associate director position first came open, she called me up and talked to me about it. And I don't know why, because I wasn't interested, and I thought, well, maybe she's just talking through what her thoughts were, and she was. So she was thinking about it the first time it came around. I don't know that she ever applied. But when I saw it posted the second time, I sent it to her and said, you better apply this time. And she had already kind of gone through that full circle of processing what it meant to be in that kind of leadership role early in your career, as you said, Adam. And she was really in a groove. She really had a whole cadre of people who appreciated her work. She clearly had excellent relationships with her colleagues, and she was making very significant contributions to the program. So everything reflected her energy and her capacity to contribute to both methodology and to staff, and to show that through her leadership. So I can only imagine what BLS has been like in these last few months, having missed her. But I think her legacy is in the people, in the contributions, and the momentum on the Consumer Expenditure Survey redesign, because that has been a long-standing, a very difficult redesign effort, and her influence on it, I'm sure, will continue. Thank you.
Very well said. Thanks, Eileen. Any other memories or thoughts that anyone wanted to share?
Hi, yes, this is Diane Willamack, and I'm trying to figure out my camera is there. Hi. I had the glorious pleasure of working with Jennifer on several projects and several interagency projects. A couple of things that we initiated or got thrown into the bucket together about, and I don't have remarks prepared like I'm, you know, at the Academy Awards. I didn't write a speech, but I don't know where to begin and where to end. it's just something that I had always expected or had been expecting to be developing more projects with her. We had a lot of things in common, and I'm at the Census Bureau, and their BLS is supposed to be joining us out in Suitland soon, and I was really looking forward to that as well as a way of getting to work more closely with Jennifer, although I was afraid I would lose my job to Jennifer. So, but we worked on some interagency projects that had large teams, and she was the manager of the team, and all of the things that Adam said and the others have said about how she managed a group of people and got us working together when we disagreed, and always came around to the action items at the end. I'm not that organized, and so that was incredibly meaningful to me to be saying, okay, this is you're going to do, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to do, and held us accountable to that. And then there was another project, also interagency, that my director at the Census Bureau declined to be involved in, and Jennifer saw how important this would also be to my area at the Census Bureau, and invited us to participate, at least in terms of the discussions and contributions to what others were doing to do this project. Those are going to be memories that I always cherish, and wish I could emulate and live up to. Jennifer was supposed to, one of our recent project that we were going to be working together on was she was supposed to be co-authoring a chapter for the ISIS monograph. And I know I would have it a whole lot in a whole lot better shape if she were part of it, and keeping me on track with making with getting the topics together and getting it written and getting it out and getting it back for comment and all of that. That, even if she weren't the first author, she would have been making sure we were organized and holding ourselves accountable to getting it done and getting it done well. And I am just very, very heartbroken to not have her be part of that effort. We do intend to dedicate the chapter to her. It'd be nice. That's our plan. Because she would have been part of it, and she should be part of it. So the main thing that I was thinking when I first logged in here and made myself speak and be visible was I didn't know what else to say except I miss her. I miss her. And my heart goes out to her family and to all of her colleagues, all of us. And yet for being grateful that was part of our lives and had that influence on us and will be in our memories and hearts forever. I miss her. Thank you, Adam, for hosting this.
Thanks, Diane. So well said and also true. Any other memories or thoughts that anyone wanted to share?
Hi, this is Kristen Stetler. I work with Diane, and I worked with Jennifer on several projects. And I agree with everything that everyone else said. Jennifer was an amazing person, and she's really missed. One thing I wanted to mention was that she was really able, I think you mentioned this a little bit in your 9 things, but really able to cut through all of the, extra stuff and really make things precise and direct. And, the project that one of the projects that we worked together on, our final report at Census was something like 70 pages, and her final, memo at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and really, hit the highlights and the important stuff, and it was great. And that was really something that she was great at as well. So I wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. That's a good point, and there are so many things that you could say about how Jennifer worked and about how she worked with people. You know, the list just goes on. Any other thoughts or memories from anyone? I didn't know if Justin or David or Arlene or any other of Jennifer's family who's on this call wanted to say anything. No pressure, but I wanted to make sure that you knew that the floor was open.
Yeah, once everybody's spoken what they'd like to, I'd like to say a few things. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any memories or thoughts that they wanted to share?
This is Heather Rodolfo. I worked with Jennifer a lot over the years. We started in government around the same time. And I would just echo everything everybody else has said about her. She was, you know, my go-to gal for everything. Whenever I had a methodological question, she was the first person I called. She was my favorite person to catch up with and gossip with and complain with, and she was just always there for me, whether it be work related or kid related or whatever. She was always there to listen. And so, yeah, I just want to say how much I miss her so much. And I wanted to thank WSSS and DC-AAPOR for putting this together, because it's been so hard, you know, through the pandemic, to really process her loss. But so I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Maybe I'll go ahead and say something too. So like everybody else said, Jennifer, she meant a lot to me. She was actually one of the first people I think I met when I started in OSMR and at BLS. And I remember our first interaction because she stopped by my workstation and actually dropped off a whole bunch of CE documentation and said, read up. And you know, we worked on the Gemini project together. We did a couple of papers together. And, you know, over the time that I've known her, she really became more than just a colleague. She became, you know, like Heather said, your go-to person. Yeah, I miss her. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm Jennifer Maddens, and I wanted to just reiterate some things that Cynthia said about the FCSM, because Jennifer was hugely important to the work of the Federal Committee on Statistical Methodology, and she and I worked, headed up a group that was creating a new set of standards. And I can honestly say that if she hadn't been involved, they would never have gotten done. And it's for all of those reasons that everyone has said, that, and just her style and her expertise and the way she conducted herself. I will say that there were 5 Jennifers on FCSM at that time, and we would often sit together at meetings when we had in-person meetings just to confuse everyone. And we had a great time. I'm not sure anyone else did, but we sometimes wore the same color just to increase it. When she decided to apply for the associate commissioner, she contacted me, and we had a long talk about many long talks about what it meant to take that kind of position. And all I can say is, from the beginning of those conversations to the end, all I could say is do it, do it, do it. And I kept asking her what was happening, knowing how long it takes for those things to happen. But when it was finally named, it was just the right thing to happen. And like everyone else, I really do miss her. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. I can tell you that at BLS, there was a sizable contingent of folks who, when Jennifer was applying for the position or when the position was open, who were thinking if they pick anybody else, it would be a terrible mistake. And there was such a huge sigh of relief that they got it right and they picked Jennifer. Anyone else have anything to share before we move on to the family? Okay. Justin, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Thanks for organizing this, you and Jeff especially. I just want to say thank you for inviting myself and the family to this. I know my parents are on here, Jen's parents are on here as well, so it's just wonderful to see everything that has progressed. I was thinking about this as I was invited a couple weeks ago, and I was reading it, and I'm like, man, this project, I feel like my entire time with her, I've heard this, and it was great to recognize that, yeah, it has been at least a decade that she's been working on this, because I remember listening to things about the project of the redesign for so long. And just wanted to let most of you know, I know the last year of meeting she was in, during this meeting, our dog Loki walked in, and I know how special he was to a lot of you, seeing him in the background on meetings that Jen hosted during the COVID era. So it was, I think maybe he heard some of your voices when you were talking and thought he needed to come in because he was so used to all those colleagues of Jen talking. So this was great. It means so much to hear the wonderful things people say. It means a lot to me to see what has become of sort of her ideas and her hard work. I did have to laugh at Adam's list of 9 lessons he learned from Jennifer, because I think he missed an important one that I would have as number 10, and that would be make a list. I think that is, I've been knowing her and married to her for almost 16 years. My life has become a series of lists. I know at home it was that way, at work it was that way. So I think one of the things that surely he could have added on there was make a list, and it just shows that he did make a list of 9 things. He just missed one of the most important ones at the end there. So it really made me smile and laugh a little bit. I'll tell you, I was invited to this and heard about this honor a couple weeks ago, and about the same time the boys and I were out back, and we made a fire pit a couple years ago, or actually it's 8 years ago now when we moved into this house. And it's a favorite place of ours, s'mores, campfires. It was a favorite place of Jen and I to sit outside. And that night, a couple nights after I heard about this, Noah, our youngest, he likes to throw water on the fire and put out the big flame. We just put a new piece of wood on there, and the flame went out. And then I put the kids to bed. And when I came back down, I looked outside, and the embers were still burning. And then when I woke up in the morning, I came out to the kids and I said, Noah, did you notice that something weird about the fire? And he said, what? I said, that log that was there is gone. And it made me think about Jen and the impact, the fire of her life has gone out, but the heat and the embers that remained from her work and her dedication have such more long-lasting impact, and they lead to results that once that flame died out, there's so much more that she touched or that she created with her life that is going to be moving forward in many directions, and not just professionally like we've seen with the Gemini Project, but the kids, the piece of her that's in the kids and our relationship and everything. It means a lot to finally see this and see that everything she believed in and worked so hard for has that lasting impact, just like that flame did with the fire. And it touched me to know that everybody still thinks about her, that everything is moving forward, because she cared so deeply professionally, and she cared deeply personally about a lot of you as well. And just hearing those stories, and it's such a shame that I got to know a lot of you a little bit while she was alive, and I feel like I've seen more of you in the last 6 months than I did then. But it's just the way of things, and it's just unfortunate that it had to happen that way. But I hear stories about a lot of the people that made comments today and shared things, and it's amazing to see. And for her to be named as the 2020 recipient of the award was outstanding. I mean, just meant the world to me. I know it would have meant the world to her as well. So thank you very much, and just keep her in your hearts, keep her in your memories, because that's the best place that it can be, and keep pushing forward with everything she worked for. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin. And when you were talking about the fire and the heat remaining, it made me think how grateful I am that at BLS they did move ahead and rename the Innovation Award in Jennifer's honor, and that her name will carry on indefinitely at BLS and be remembered, not just through all of the work that she was involved in and the people that she interacted with, but now as a part of the organization itself. Before we close this out, any final thoughts from anyone? No. Okay. Well, I just wanted to say again how grateful I am to DC-AAPOR and WSS and Jeff Gonzalez in particular for organizing this memorial seminar. I think it was a really meaningful, heartfelt, and wonderful way to remember Jennifer and to hear some of the memories that people shared and to be able to get together in this way. So thanks again to everybody who was able to attend. And as a reminder, a recording of the event will be made available on WSS's YouTube channel. Okay, thanks everyone.